think it's going to look like, Brian?
I think we caught it too early. I don't know if we'll see anything.
We'll just not see anything?
Yeah, I don't think we will.
Devin and Brian noticed during a pull, was it yesterday morning, that it spiked some coolant pressure. Every test that we did, probably 100, 150 plus runs, coolant pressure has always just sat where it was. And so when we got up to like, I think it was only like 20, 30 pounds, if we held it for like 5 seconds, we could start building a couple pounds of coolant pressure. And so we could tell that that was different enough that we made the call to pull it apart. And hopefully we can just refresh most things. Maybe it needs new rings, but I'm interested to see. You know, this is all of us learning how this lives. But you know, its whole life cycle was, you know, majority extreme exhaust pressure. So we knew that we were beating on it, and so right before the coolant pressure, we heard it do a backfire or two. So I don't know if it has maybe a enlarged valve guide or something, and maybe it made a valve stick or hang or something like that. But we'll get the head gone through and check out everything that the block lived through, and we can all learn together.
This has a lot of passes on it.
It does not owe us anything. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, they all look perfect.
Looks good. This must have been pushing down on the bucket and just had some moisture on it. It's just a little bit of surface rust. But So the point of this foam is so the buckets don't fall out when we flip the head over to look at the valves and underneath everything. When the machine shop gets the cylinder head, they tip the valves. So these buckets are specific towards each hole. So we don't want to lose the order that they're in.
Straps look pretty good. Uniform, there's nothing immediately apparent, but by and large, I'm really happy with how it looks. And I think that we caught it before we did much damage. I think it's just a simple refresh so far. I mean, who knows, maybe we'll see there's something different in the bearings, but
Right.
very happy so far.
The oil looked clean when I was draining it.
Awesome.
So,
Cool.
yeah, there's no signs of like, you know,
Yeah.
one cylinder had cleaned itself or
Right,
anything,
right,
you know.
exactly. We don't have like a pressure cleaned combustion chamber or anything like that.
A lot of people don't read the fine print when you install these. You're supposed to hone the inside of these to fit the crank, so it's a nice press fit. Usually they put a little more meat on than normal. So if you don't hone it and you press it on, good luck getting it off. And if you don't have one of these, it's not coming off. So this is a add-on to this kit. So this is specific for 2Js and Duramax. They have the same thread pitch.
Ooh, nice.
It was nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty nice.
Husky from Lowe's, $7.99. That's all I got.
Okay.
I think it's really awesome that we were able to see, I don't know, maybe it was crank flex, but here across these 7 o'clock sights down the main bearings, you can kind of see some heat transfer. It almost seems to walk down the caps here. You don't see it much on the number 1, but back here you can see it. And then also notice that there might have been a little piece of trash here in the crank somewhere, because it looks like it kind of came out, maybe went around the crank, maybe caught itself somewhere in the bearing, and then it maybe put this little stripe down the middle of the main bearing. Definitely did have some heat. Did have some heat through the mains. But what's interesting, we saw on the rods that we were getting some of that oil film aeration, or at least that's what, after we spoke with Cleveite last time in the Dart engine, when we saw this same pattern on the Cleveite bearings, and these are ACL bearings. I spoke to some of the engineers over there, and they were saying that this patterned kind of almost looks like you get a film, a dried film. It's like laser etched into the bearing surface. They were saying that oftentimes that is from either insufficient lubrication, from it being in under capacity oiling system, so like the gerotor pump could aerate the oil, and then you've really just got a foam. You've got a foam traveling through the engine, and so obviously the foam isn't a film where the bearing can keep metal to metal happening. And so I think that is probably what we were witnessing there. And then another thing that we've talked about a few times before is how the bearings are fed oil through the factory crankshaft. And so if you try to look down, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on camera, if you look down one of these rod journals all the way through, you can see where the oil enters from the side of the rod journal. And how we can push this through, this means that the main is not feeding directly to the rod journal. If you were to grab a Brian Crower crank, you'd be able to feed this directly through there. And what that means is that as the oil goes through the center of the crank, it will spin out to the rod journals as just by gravity throwing it out there. Here in these cranks, the oil has to get there and then turn and get forced out. So we're doing the best we can by eliminating the oil squirters on these so that we can try to bump up the pressure. Normally when we have a dry sump, we'll try to keep the oil squirters because we have as much oil pressure as we need. But I think that we're likely just called this when we should. You know, luckily we had that telltale sign of the coolant pressure, but we can see that the bearings were starting to get into distress. We can clearly see some heat here. We can see some rod bearing distress on a couple of the sites. Pins, pistons all look great. Crank may have been flexing some. It doesn't look like we have anything critical here. I do think that was probably a little piece of trash that we got some stripe down on that one bearing site. But I think this is another great data point so that we can see how a stock but prepared 2JZ lives with a lot of abuse. Even in just that camshaft test that we did for Kelford and Precision a month or two ago, that was over 130 runs, just that one test. And so this thing really has had more abuse than you would think in just a short lifespan, but it's really cool to learn about it. So we just left the engine room, and I went back and I grabbed my computer and I had pulled up the 7675 test that we had just released, and I saw with that test we had another 20 or 30,000 plus horsepower runs. And so this mule engine actually has probably had 150 to 200 runs, and one of the reasons that we were really excited about doing this is that we knew that we were going to intentionally be able to bring this engine into distress over and over and over and over and over again. And since we don't have to risk customer money, that's fine. We can see where it fails. We can take it apart early, we can take it apart too late, and we can just learn new things. And so when we were doing this last test with the 120 testing for Precision, which is basically, we took the original mule, and the philosophy with the original mule was to take and
unported 2JZ basically as far as you can. And so there are 100 different ways to do that, but what we did is we used the normal small frame size of turbochargers that the majority of people are going to look for. We used the standard wet sump oiling system, which is what the majority of people are going to do. We kept a 2JZ block, which is what the majority of people are going to do. We didn't port the head, which is what the majority of people are going to do. And so what we did is we went all the way up to the 7275, which is really probably the best stopping point as far as the turbine wheel matching the compressor wheel from a drive and torque and wheel matching standpoint. The compressor wheel matches the turbine wheel pretty well for a 2JZ size engine and kind of the flow profile of that. Now the 7675 is really just designed to say, okay, well, I just want to really stretch the 75 turbine as far as I can, or it's well matched to a smaller engine. But on the 2JZ, we're basically saying we're stretching everything that we can. We know that there's plenty of power to be picked up from a ported cylinder head, but we're intentionally trying to push it further. And so, again, with that, we went to a turbine housing that's probably a little bit too big. Most of the time, a 75 turbine wheel seems to want something in like the 1.0 range, give or take. You might say 10% higher than that for a divided housing, or 0.1 depending on which rule of thumb you've heard. But either way, we went to the 120, which is basically saying, well, we want as much flow as we can get out of this. We went to the 76 millimeter compressor wheel, which is saying we want as much flow as we can get out of this. And in doing that, in using things that aren't necessarily the most efficient, we had to drive it really, really hard to try and hit the boost targets that we were trying to hit without using something more race car level like CO2 boost control or anything like that. There are more exotic ways that we could manage it and try to get it, but we were trying to use, again, more traditional strategies to try and achieve these targets. And so with that 120 test, we felt like we got a great profile of where the engine lives, of what the 75 turbine can produce on a 2JZ before porting. And so the next mule, the idea for the next mule would probably be that we're going to go to the next build interval that a 2JZ would go to. So the plan right now would be to take all the parts over to MazWorks. We're going to have Mark and Miguel and the team tell us what is able to be reused, what bore we can use. The bores looked good to me, but we'll have the experts check it out, see if we'll stay as small as we can. We're going to stick with the fire ring setup. The fire ring setup is simply because we are treating this engine so poorly. Traditionally, these are power levels that can be achieved and that we've achieved with a traditional MLS gasket. But this allows us to aggressively pursue this, beating on this engine over and over and over. And actually, the way that we identified that it would be a good time to tear this down is that in doing a middle horsepower pull, checking a boost target on the 7675, Brian and Devin actually had identified that we had a little bit of coolant pressure that we hadn't seen on prior runs, even with higher power. So given that we had that sensor, we were able to make the call to tear it down, and then right there we were able to see that things were starting to wear. You know, heating the bearings, heating the different areas of the parts, main caps, rods, etc. And so right now the plan is probably to do a ported head on the next 3-liter 2JZ, and then we will most likely keep moving up from this 11 to 1200 horsepower area, and then once we're able to kind of validate that, the 2JZ block through its ceiling, which is realistically 13 to 1600 horsepower depending on your level of preparation, then we plan to move into the stroker engines and the dart blocks and push further. And we've got a couple really exciting customer projects coming down the pipeline with the dart block and dry sumps and all sorts of other things that we're excited to show you guys soon. Appreciate you guys watching. If you have any feedback, any suggestions, any engines or combinations you'd love to see us test, or if you have any needs for your builds, please reach out to our team. It's what we're here for. It's what we love doing. Thanks so much. See you next time.